One of the places I've found coaching to be really incredibly useful is with young people. We work a lot with teachers in schools all over the world, Hong Kong, various countries, and schools here. And the teachers have found it invaluable to add to their teaching techniques, as well as to develop their teams, of course. The head teachers have found it really useful. And most of all, one of the most exciting involvements has been working with charities. I'm involved with a charity called the Ministry of Entrepreneurship, and I've designed a programme which runs 5 times a year, where we have kids on it who are sponsored by people like Kids Co and Centrepoint, and we get them really when they're about 18 to 25, and they've been kind of saved by these charities. They're kids who were on the streets or drug addicts, gang leaders. You know, we've had people with scars from when they were in knife gangs and so on. And they have got to the point where they say, right, I want to join society, I want a job, I want to study, I want to be someone, I want a normal life. And of course, most of them have never had any role models where they could learn how to communicate, even how to have a sentence. Some of them come from backgrounds where the only language is shouting and beating. And they've had all of their confidence beaten out of them by parents and so on. And what we give them is the communication skills to support their new intentions and their new ambitions. And I've heard them say things like, oh, if I'd had these skills when I got into trouble, I wouldn't have got into trouble. And this work, getting involved in this work for me, was inspired by a young guy we had on an Arts Council course once, who was sponsored to be on it. He ran an Arts Council music studio in London, in an area where there were lots of stabbings. And when he did his sort of final closing from the course, where everyone says what they got out of the course, when he'd learnt coaching skills, he said, well, I live in an area where there were lots of street stabbings, and I've realised that before the knives there are words, and the words lead to the knives. And he said, with these new skills, I can stop this at the word stage, so we won't get to the knives. And I was absolutely blown away with this, and I thought, I've got to somehow get coaching out of the corporate world, where it's very expensive to do it. We run open courses, it's very expensive to come on them. You have to be quite a senior manager to be able to learn coaching skills. And I thought, I want to get it out to the world where it's needed, to people who can't pay for it. And so the next step, I went to Crisis for Christmas and did a couple of days there after Christmas. And I ran communication skills workshops. And when I wasn't running a workshop, I just went and chose people who looked particularly miserable, and just went and sat next to them and talked to them in a coaching style, relaxed coaching style of conversation. And I wanted to find out how useful coaching skills would be in that environment. And I was working in the rough sleepers shelter. So these people, it was one of the coldest winters we'd had. These people had come from sleeping on snow-laden streets, and at New Year they were going to be taken by bus and dropped back to where they'd been picked up and to sleep in the snow again. And some of them were ex-drug addicts who could have gone and slept on the floor of a friend, but they knew if they went back to that environment, they would end up back on crack. So they preferred to sleep in a park in the snow rather than... So that's how dedicated they were when you got to the bottom of it, that's how dedicated people were to changing. And there was one particular man who was very old, very weather-beaten, and loads of fun. He laughed all the time. And he was playing cards with people all the time and just enjoying the food and the warmth and everything. But I sat with him a few times, had a few conversations with him, and he identified that he had a gambling addiction and a drink addiction, and he identified during those conversations that the reason he did these things was because he was lonely, and he'd never had that revelation before. And he ended up by pulling a number out. He'd been carrying a number around with him for years of a rehabilitation thing done by nuns for addicted gamblers. And he'd carried the number around. He said, I've never rung it. I know I should, but I've never rung it. And he put it on the table. He said, when I get out of here, I'm going to ring this number. And I don't know if he did, but it just really taught me this is where coaching is needed more than anywhere else. And so when my colleague at the Association for Coaching, Darren Robson, created the Ministry of Entrepreneurship, he asked me to provide the coach training. So it was just really what I've been looking for, to get the skills out to a much broader audience. We've had people who've come off the courses and built businesses, and we know we're really making a difference. So it's great to know that coaching can make such a difference.